Do you want to go over briefly the actual phase-in plan?
Well, I wish I knew what it was, and I'm sure that's the great frustration with every single business that you represent within the chamber, is people want to know, well, does this mean me? Does this mean my business can open up after the 18th? Or if my business can open up, what does it mean in terms of opening up? You know, what restrictions will I have on my business? What types of things will I be able to do? You know, if I'm in the restaurant business, right, I want to know, you know, can I open up fully with masks and gloves and different protocols, or am I opening up at 50% or 25%, or in some cases, a neighboring state is opening up the restaurants, but only outside seating. So it's going to depend upon what the opening task force comes up with recommendations that the lieutenant governor actually is leading for the governor. And he had the press conference the other day. And for those of you, if you go online and look at this mass.gov and go in, he'll have, you know, this chart that you guys may have received that talks about the phase-in plan. And this is exactly what it says. I'm reading from it. Current state, which is stay at home. And then we go into phase 1, which is the start of opening. But that is limited industries resume operations with severe restrictions. But it doesn't say what the industries are or what the restrictions are, right? And then the second is phase 2 is cautious phase. And that says additional industries resume operations with restrictions and capacity limits. And then phase 3 is being vigilant. And it says additional industries resume operations with guidance. So there'll be several guidance documents that will come out with new industries that get opened up. And then the 4th phase is development of a vaccine. So you're going to be dealing with a new normal, waiting for that vaccine to be developed. We're all in a world of a new, I would say, abnormal right now, right? We are, that's where we are, because otherwise we'd be having this meeting in person, and I could come in and much rather prefer that, you know, interpersonal exchange and being able to talk to people and shake hands and you know, do all of those types of things that, you know, some of those things are going to go away for the foreseeable future, and because we're going to be in a very new world as we go forward, no matter what business or what's happening in government as we move forward because of this virus.
Does anybody have any questions for the senator right now? Any comments about anything that he said? Yes, Chris?
Chris? Yeah.
Hey, Senator, thanks. I just had a question. I've been getting an email daily from the Massachusetts Restaurant Association, and there's been talk that the legislature is working on a bill that would make it up to the cities and towns to authorize outdoor use and liquor sales outside. Are you part of that bill? Do you know anything about that legislation?
That's been talked about for a long time, and I'm generally supportive of the whole idea of restaurants. As a matter of fact, years ago, I was involved with the outdoor cafe, you know, bylaw. I'm not even sure if it's on the books today or not, Chris, in Taunton, but we used to have a bylaw which at the local level, cities and towns could put in place so that people could have outdoor cafes along the sidewalk. And you'd get so much seating outside in front of the restaurant and utilize some outdoor space. With the with the new information that's come down from the CDC and some of the new studies that have come out, that in and of itself doesn't relieve the problem in terms of what I think they're going to recommend, for us. Certainly, Mass Restaurant has been advocating opening with restrictions, so that staff would wear masks, customers would wear masks, except for eating. They would be, different types of spacing requirements within restaurants. The real concern that public health officials here have, and Dr. Fauci had expressed nationally the other day, is that states have to be very careful as to what they do and how quickly they open, because you could be back for a resurgence of what we were seeing. And actually, yesterday in Massachusetts, unfortunately, the numbers went up again, and we really need a few weeks of those hospitalization numbers actually going down, and even outcome data going down, and that's what I think they're going to be looking at. So yeah, I'm aware of the discussion, and there's some significant discussion around the ways in which that would work. Right now, we're still under emergency orders, and in the legislature right now, even if one member of the legislature were to object on a bill, it would be held up. As a matter of fact, we're meeting as I'm speaking to you today, but I've already cast the one vote that we're going to be having today. We are borrowing $1 billion today in the Commonwealth. That is just to get us through the rest of this fiscal period at the state level. I have cast my vote remotely via letter to the clerk of the Senate, and it will be read today when that vote comes up. It's basically the governor's borrowing bill for $1 billion. That is the beginning of what you're going to start seeing happening relative to the financial consequences of essentially a government shutdown economy, which has, because of the virus, which has taken all the sales that took place at a lot of our restaurants, people that are laid off. Probably 1 out of 5 workers in the Commonwealth now are on unemployment. Those wages are not the same in terms of income tax deductions, etc. I mean, income tax payments. So we are in a crucial situation. So I'm paying attention to that, and I'd be interested in your input on it and how I can advocate, for your needs, while at the same time understanding that this virus is very contagious, and if people don't do the right thing in opening, we will end up seeing a significant resurgence, and then, going right back to where we were before, which will be twice as costly for everybody at the end of the day. Because all these things you're seeing at the federal level, with $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, after a while it adds up to real money. And everything you're seeing us doing at the state level, at the end of the day, all of that will add up to a significant revenue shortfall that will have to be made up, either in cuts to services or increase revenue that will come back at the end of the day. But
Thank you, Senator. From what I understand, that the crux of it is they want the ABC to give local municipalities the flexibility to alter and allow outside liquor sales in the dining area, which I think, either way, the restaurants will have to follow the governor's mandate related to capacity and social distancing and stuff like that, but just to allow them to use an outside area in accordance with all the other rules. So I would think that would be something that would be
That's,
reasonable.
yeah, that's simple enough. And if you're going to allow restaurants opening, depending upon the capacity number and being able to serve outside, I don't think that will be something that as you know, when we first allowed the to-go piece, the sale of beer or other types of things were not allowed, but that got changed to allow, sales to try to help out to the extent possible during the emergency, time. So I'm certainly willing to look at that and seeing what we can do with that if we're going to be having it as part of what the governor's plan is going to be. But in terms of the specifics of the governor's plan, I as you can see from what I read earlier, it's very vague right now. And I don't think we're going to know the specifics of it until the 18th. I think when he comes out on the 18th and makes his announcement as to what set of industries are going to be put into different categories for opening, and then what the conditions will be that they're able to open under will be determined at that time. Maybe it'll come out earlier, but we've tried to prod a little bit and try to get more information on it, but that's all that's been allowed, publicly, so far.
All right, thank you. That wraps up my question. I may have some more, but I'll let somebody else take a chance.
Thank you, Chris.
So I don't know if Rob, your mic is muted, or do you not have an ability to speak, or do you want to ask the senator about the employee situation? Okay, it's probably why he typed it.
If he doesn't, him and I spoke about that yesterday, and I'll just throw it out there because I did speak to him probably every couple days now. He's having trouble with the unemployment rules related to employees making more not working than they would work and getting employees to come back to work. And I'm hearing that from quite a few businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a concern, Senator.
Yeah, I'm hearing that as well, that the $600 additional stimulus funds that were granted at the federal level, in addition to the unemployment checks, is a concern for getting people back to work. First of all, there's a twofold issue going on. Number one, the employee, if they're able to be home on unemployment and then actually getting a little bit more than they would have on unemployment, the idea, though, of that was not necessarily for just restaurant employees or what, hospitality industry employees, although a big segment of those employees that have been unemployed are from that sector, is trying to get that additional $600 in the hands of people so that they can pay rent, they can pay some of the bills they need to pay to have that money go right back into the economy. So that's what the idea of that was. The unique situation that is taking place is something that's going to have to be looked at, and I know it's being discussed at the federal level. We've talked about it a little bit at the state level because we certainly don't want to have a situation where it's a perverse outcome, where you're actually incentivizing people, not to go to work. If we're saying it's safe to go to work, under certain conditions that are put in place, then, you know, whether or not somebody should be eligible for unemployment is another question that we're going to have to, you know, deal with. So I've heard it. I know about the concerns, and we are continuing to discuss that. And one of the things the governor's task force on reopening is looking at this question as well, because it is something that's concerning there. And I know, John, you had a question too from what's happening relative to takeout, beer sales, and that type of thing. You're muted right now.
Yes, I wish I had my optical mouse. The mice that are built into these laptops don't work with my fat fingers. So good to see you again, of course. And yes, the question I have is, you know, my club manager called me this morning saying, hey, by the way, the Elks are doing this, and I think we should do it too. And I'm saying to myself, okay, I know nothing about the legality of this, and I don't want to go tripping off into an area where it gets us exposed. So if you have any info, that would be great.
Yeah, no, you can do it. It's my understanding that you can do it. It was part of what was authorized by the administration to sell to go as part of a to go order. You know, if you have beer that is sitting there, you know, you might as well be able to sell that as part of an order, etc. So I believe you can do that.
Thank you.
If I find out anything different than that, I will get back to you. But I think that's what you're doing, Chris, right?
Yes, you can do to-go liquor sales. You just can't open. It has to be a sealed container. Can't be draft or
Yeah.
mixed drinks or anything like that. Has to be a sealed container. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I saw John had another question related to childcare too. We put in the chat feed.
Let me see here. Yeah, give me that again, John.
So there's really, you know, I'm wearing my autism love hat today for a reason. You know, special needs and special needs education, I think, is something that I haven't heard personally a whole lot of, and I know that it doesn't have a direct relationship to the business conversation that we're having, but what the school systems are able to provide is certainly an important issue for employees, if not employers. And the second part of the conversation is, you know, with the daycare thing being what it is right now, I think we're seeing, or there's a potential here for the gradual or the phased opening of the state and the businesses to actually start ahead of when, you know, daycare can reopen, and that's going to create some real logistical problems for folks. And I don't know if there's enough of those two conversations going on right now.
Yeah, I can tell you, John, that there is a lot of conversation going on about this particular question, and I think it does have a direct impact with businesses, because one of the reasons why you're seeing some employees not wanting to go back to work if they're able to, you know, have some financial ability to stay home is they have a childcare issue. You know, they have a childcare issue. They have, especially if you have a childcare issue, when there are special types of situations that exist in caring for the child and making sure that all of the wraparound services are there to ensure for the children's safety and for their education. So I think it's a legitimate question. And if you've been, you may have read, but of course I'm always reading the State House News Service, not necessarily a publication on the average reader's list these days. But if you take a look at some of the conversations that have been coming out of Beacon Hill, in particular, the Senate President, and there's a whole group of people that are looking at this in the Senate and the House, led by a lot of the leaders who are women legislators who have been getting a disproportionate share of calls on this issue, and are encouraging the governor to make sure we're dealing with childcare from a public health perspective, from a public health and education perspective, and also it's a business issue that you know that impedes the ability of a lot of workers to want to come back into the workforce because they have these very personal responsibilities, you know, to make sure the kids are okay, right? So that has to be dealt with, and we are working on ensuring that we have daycare and childcare, you know, slots available. And it's not just the availability of them; it's the affordability of them as well. So you know, that becomes a major issue as we go forward. If we think about it, the number of children, I don't even have the number off the top of my head, but number of children in public schools, in all schools, not just public, but public, private, charter, all across the Commonwealth that are now home. You know, it's a huge deal, and it's an even bigger deal when you're dealing with special education services, because those types of services, you know, aren't provided right at the corner school somewhere. I mean, this is something that, you know, is, so I get what you're saying. As somebody who I served on a school board here in Taunton for 10 years and chaired it for a couple of years. So, you know, early intervention services, before and after school programs, all the different types of things that are critical for care for children need to be there, and we're trying to make sure that it's happening. I know the local school system is doing a great job with making sure that food security is taken care of in terms of getting the school buses that we have going around and getting lunches and other types of food service to a lot of the families that need that, need those, you know, need that nourishment. So that's a good thing. And they are trying to deal with the special circumstances of special education with their IEP plan, and trying to make sure that is dealt with.
Sure. I just want to make sure too that it's understood that I'm not complaining or being critical by any means, because as a former, you know, continuity planner, this is a scenario that I don't believe that anybody could have possibly imagined in any of their continuity of services plans. So I am not being critical whatsoever. I'm just trying to make sure that everybody's continuing this conversation, because it's going to become more important as we go forward. And I appreciate the update from you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's on the radar screen, absolutely, because, and actually, I have some members. I'm not fortunate enough, unfortunately, to have you know, the significant blessing of having some children. But many of my colleagues, I'm hearing it even from my colleagues that are home now. Schools.
Homeschooling is no joke.
Homeschooling is a big challenge. Just keeping their children in front of the computer while they're doing the class scenario is becoming a huge challenge. And knowing that there's no school now to the end of the year, and depending upon what happens, you know, you may not see, you know, schools reopen in the fall, depending upon the higher education institution, or depending upon what happens with K through 12, in particular if we had a resurgence. And specifically because we're starting to see some of the outcomes that are taking place, and nobody knows if it's direct result of COVID-19 or if it's a mutation of the virus, but you're starting to see all these cases in children that are coming forward now. And so that gets pretty scary for people who have children. That's very frightening to think about, and how we're going to deal with that will be something that we need to really take these issues into consideration. So even if we do childcare, or we have daycare, and we have other ways to deal with this, we may need to see other regulations wrapped around those services to protect the safety of the children that are in these programs. So, given the new public health data we're having, but it's on everybody's radar screen. Thank you. You have some other questions as well, I think, Christine.
Yes. So Tom Talbot is with First Citizens Federal Credit Union, and he has a question about reconsidering building and funding like big mega schools with this, a fear that it would be harder to contain and protect the kids, and the people in that building because it's so big.
Well, in terms of the whole, there's interesting things that have happened in terms of COVID-19 and the public response, government's response. And in some of the most challenging circumstances that we're dealing with, there are lessons learned, and there are opportunities for the future that we can take out of it, right? And so while there are significant challenges relative to homeschooling or at the college level or high school level, there's also opportunities here. For example, what we're doing right now, wouldn't have been something that people would have thought about doing maybe, 2-3 years ago. But here we are. We're in a different format, different way of dealing with communication, and it's going to be an increased opportunity for public education in terms of reaching out. So Tom is correct to consider what happens with the significant building costs that the taxpayers pay for, creating additional space that may or may not be needed. Now, for Tom, so that you'll be aware, the existing infrastructure that's already been approved. For example, here in Taunton, we've got a new school going up. It's going to be chock full of all the newest technology and everything else that, you want to have. But at the same time, people will start to ask, do we really need to add on to the infrastructure costs and the maintenance costs of doing that? And there are different ways that we can utilize school buildings and set up schedules whereby we have some children going to school some days, other schools going to school different hours, utilize technology for supplementing that, etc. All of those things are actually seriously being looked at for the rest of the 21st century, not only here in Massachusetts, but throughout the country. It is a big challenge and something we're working on. I actually, through the Council of State Governments, which is a national organization that represents legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. It's the only organization like that in the country that does it, and it's called the Council of State Government. I'm actually the co-chair of a task force that they've created on the future of work. And the future of work, there are literally thousands of jobs that we don't have today that will be created as a result of the major changes that are taking place in technology and the workplace, and being able to get our work done from anywhere. It's the same thing with public education, in particular at the higher grade levels. Although I have some of the young people in my family that could do it even at a K through 12 level. They'd be much better with technology than I am. So it's amazing what is happening. So I couldn't agree with Tom more that we're going to have to be looking at these huge schools. I mean, it's a number of different ways. I'm not sure exactly what he means by the protection and containment part of the question. Protecting them in terms of access to the building, that's just a security question in terms of what happens at any facility today, and in particular government facilities going forward. But a lot of that in terms of security will also have to do with technology, deploying the best technologies to make sure we protect any public asset as we move forward.
I think what he might have meant by that is with so many people in a building, going outside to play, they're eating lunch, they're always using the bathroom. I mean, it's kind of hard to keep that eye on each kid, making sure that they're being, sanitary, that type of thing.
Oh, okay, yeah. There's a thumbs up from Tom. So he says, yes, that's exactly what he was, you've interpreted his question correctly. And I couldn't, obviously that's going to be a question going forward. And that's why people, some people think I'm a little nuts when I talk about climate change so much. But one of the things dealing with the changing climate that we are experiencing already with EEE, Zika, all kinds of viruses. This is an example of something that nobody saw coming. Well, actually, a lot of people saw coming. It's just that it wasn't dealt with the way we should have been dealing with it. And when you're getting into a much changing climate where temperatures are changing and the whole scope of what's happening vis-a-vis public health, we're going to have to really start paying attention to this much more seriously than we ever have before. And we're all, it's a big wake-up call for us, right? I mean, who would have ever thought we'd have been in the situation that we're in right now? And if there are other types of things that can happen in the future that could put us right back into this situation again with other types of viruses, boy, we better be planning for it. And we better be a lot more prepared than we have been for this one. So I couldn't agree more that the big schools, anytime you have huge amount of people together, it's a problem. And especially with this virus and the way it transmits. There was a study out today by one of the universities talking about the fact that the virus now, if somebody's talking for about a minute, the time I've been talking right now, that through the breath and the droplets in my breath, that it would linger for up to as much as 8 minutes in the atmosphere around me. And so that's why it becomes so contagious, and that's why it's encouraged for everybody to be wearing masks and, so on and so forth. But we've got a testing, huge issue, even in businesses, testing, treatment, and tracing, making sure we're tracing, the places that people have gone, et cetera, what you've done, who you've spoken with, who an employee has spoken with, who they've met with for having discussions across the table for more than, now we're talking about a minute, it's without a mask on, and with you not having a mask on, people are really placing themselves at risk with somebody that may be asymptomatic, but they're not really. I'll share with those that are on the call, my mom, who's 88 years old, who's at Long Meadow Nursing Home, now has COVID-19.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
It's scary when you get that call. We're lucky that she is mostly asymptomatic COVID-19 patient, thankfully. So it's frightening for people and families that get that diagnosis, and that's why instant testing needs to be part of the future here on this. Isolation of people that have been tested positive, critical, and then tracing to find out so we can put an end to this disease, or cut it, get it to be something that's very manageable as opposed to where we are right now. And then at the end of the day, hopefully we will have a vaccine on this. There's very talented people all over the world working on this. I just got off the phone this week with a number of the leading places in that are dealing with these issues. We're going to have, I know the CVS is deploying many more quick testing sites, and I believe here in the greater Taunton area there will be more being deployed in the area at CVS locations. I may have more on that a little later on today. Just got a email on that early this morning. That one of their leaders, their government affairs people, want to talk to me to let me know where things are going to be deployed in my district. So I would encourage employees that are working for businesses, if your employees have not been tested, I would encourage them to be tested, even if they're asymptomatic, because they could be somebody that's carrying the virus and need to be home for a few weeks instead of being in work, because that protects the rest of the workforce, and it protects themselves as well. Those types of things need to be done. The more we can do that, the better off we're going to be in terms of a region. We're sort of there's a chart, if you go into the Department of Public Health, there's a chart that's out there across the state and the nation in terms of, different colors. And we're a light blue shade in Bristol County. Plymouth County is a dark blue shade. In other words, they're much worse than we are in terms of the spread of the virus. They're more like Suffolk County, believe it or not. A lot of that may be to do with transportation, commuter transportation. We don't have it in the southern tier of Plymouth County or in Bristol County. And that may be why we're not as bad as some of the other areas that do have it, because people are not packed in, dense, settings for commuting in and out of Boston to work. But anyway, other questions?
Susan from SEED, do you want to go ahead and ask him the question about the budget you said?
Sure. Thanks, Christine. Senator Pacheco, thank you for all your information today. In light of the Commonwealth borrowing $1 billion today, that's actually frightening and really hits home, I think, for a lot of us that are dependent on some state aid. Do you have any idea about the budget for the coming year and cuts, or you mentioned some services may be restricted? Will there be new borrowing needs? I know it's a lot to think about right now, but will there be any delays in finalizing our budget for next year?
Oh, yes. Yes, they will. It's there's already a delay. As you know, Sue, we would usually already have a House budget that would have been done, you know, by now.
Mhm.
And then before Memorial Day weekend, which is coming up, we in the Senate would have concluded our budget authorizations, and we'd work in April and May to deal with the House would get it done before Memorial Day. We would get it done in April, and then May and June, we'd work out the details between the House and Senate, and then we'd have a new budget for July 1st.
Mhm.
And that's what would happen even in the second year of a 2-year term, which this is. And then we would be out of session at the end of July for the rest of the year. That is probably not going to happen this year. We are anywhere from a $4 to $6 billion revenue shortfall is being predicted right now. Now, we have $3.5 billion in a rainy day fund that we had set aside for challenging times, but we didn't expect them to be this challenging, you know? So while we have those resources, we just can't go in and tap those resources down totally. That would be not a wise financial decision because you can't predict what's coming, you know, down the road either. So a lot of what will happen, Susan, will depend upon what the federal government does now,
Okay.
because the state and local governments cannot be doing deficit spending. That's why we did a borrowing bill. We're doing a borrowing bill today for $1 billion to get us through the rest of this year. If you go back to, I think the only thing, I've been in elected office now for a while, thank you for allowing me to be, but I can tell you that last time I saw anything similar to this, but there is really nothing similar to this, because this wasn't an economic caused problem. This was caused because of a public health crisis, and the government shut down the economy essentially to deal with that. It wasn't something that was an underlying problem in the economy. We ended up forcing the closures because of where we were in terms of the financial crisis. But if you look at something that is similar in terms of the percentage of the budget here in Massachusetts, you go back to the 90s, early 90s, 89, 90, when it was the Massachusetts miracle, right, back in 1988. And then it followed up with the floor falling out from underneath us with the economy that crashed, very similar to the last recessionary periods. We're looking at the federal government to help us out here, not just Massachusetts, but all the states, because the state government has to balance its budget. The local government have to balance we have to balance the budget. The federal government is the only entity in our federalism system that can deficit spend until the economy, turns around. So they can provide aid to state and local government. And so we are asking our federal legislators to do exactly that, to come in for COVID-related situations in terms of the healthcare expenditures that our hospitals have had to, deal with. Right here locally at Morton, tremendous expenses. If you go into the Boston Metropolitan Healthcare System, tremendous expenses. Some of these hospitals are losing $5 million a day in terms of where they are. So it's going to be a tremendous challenge for us here in the Commonwealth to pay. So what does that really mean, getting back to your question? Sorry to be so long.
That's all
I
right.
just wanted to have the background for you, but it means that some of the programs that we took for granted that were always going to be there, that were supplemental programs, I would not plan on. I sent a letter to the municipal council and the mayor, I think it was last week or the week before, letting them know ahead of time. We are facing a period of unprecedented challenges. And so you need to be planning for the worst and then hoping for the best.
Okay.
Don't just don't plan on everything being hunky-dory and rosy, or I'm going to be just getting my budget level funded. $6 billion is not level funding budgets. If we lose $6 billion in revenue, that means you're going to either cut significantly to balance the budgets, or you're going to need to raise taxes to do that. And in the early 90s, when we had the problem, we borrowed, we cut, and taxes were raised just to balance the budget and to have our economy continue to head and to move forward and to be solvent. So anybody that has any relationship with the government in terms of their subsistence, they should be understanding that the government's not going to have all of the funding for them, because the monies that the government utilizes are from all of us, right? So it's our tax dollars, our federal tax dollars, some of which comes back to the states for reappropriation at the state level. And then it's the monies that we receive from income tax, from sales tax, other types of things. When the sales tax is down because you have small businesses that have closed, restaurants that are not operating at the same capacity, and all of those income taxes that are coming in or sales taxes that are coming in are not being paid, well, that lowers the amount of money that we have as a state to operate, which means if you could go forward with some level of prediction, and if it was just going to be a short period of time, a regular economic crisis, that's one thing, but that's not what we're dealing with. I think Dr. Fauci said it best. I think it was he at one of the national press conferences I was watching, where he said it would be the virus that determines when things will start to turn around. And we have a lot to do with what happens with the virus, because we have to try to do everything we can from seeing that virus, spread. So it's not, I wish I could give you better news. It's not great news, but it's
What I
better.
expected.
It's much more important right now, in my opinion, for people to hear the absolute unvarnished truth about where we are, so people can plan. Because if you're just having, pronouncements, based on hope and everything's going to be fine, well, that only goes so far when you actually have to balance the books at the end of the month, right? I mean, you have to deal with reality at the end of the month in terms of how you're going to get by from month to month, or what does it look like for the rest of the fiscal year or the calendar year, depending upon if you're running a government, a nonprofit business, or a for-profit, entity. So I just want, all of you to know that I'm working on all of these issues, and we'll try to be very responsive to businesses that call. I've had some businesses that have called me that I've actually referred to you, Susan, because I know that you're working with small businesses all the time. I've had a long relationship going all the way back to, Maria before you and others that have worked there at Seed. The same thing at the local level, dealing with the chamber and previous people that were there, including Christine now. But, it's really important for these entities that work with businesses and a lot of the banking institutions in our area that, we may need to go back to a time period. We actually created a gap financing program years ago. If you check with Maria Gooch on it, it was something that I started with her during a previous bad economic time, where we got a lot of banks that sat on a board, and we tried to finance non-financeable projects, that,
My specialty.
through this, through what was the traditional, deal. Right now, if you SBA backed loans, other types of things, but we had all the banks come together and they were willing to do it back then. We got rid of the program because then the economy got better. We didn't need it. But it may be a time to actually get a lot of people to sit around in a room and talk about this. If everybody can put some risk capital in a pool and say, a pool of funds with criteria to help people get through this period, in terms of those that would have the best shot of being able to pay those loans back. And, certainly it would be, it's not like a venture fund. It's actually an at-risk fund. We did that a number of years ago to create a lot of small businesses. And it was amazing how successful that became. It's a very different situation now, but that's just a model that had been created before. It doesn't necessarily mean it wouldn't work with a different set of criteria, today. So.
Great. We're also applying for some federal funds under EDA. So
Yes.
fingers crossed for us that we'll receive that money to help with the rebuilding phase. So I'm writing that grant right now.
Yeah. And I would definitely, all of you should definitely stay in touch through the member organizations that you have with the federal government, legislative group, whether it's Senator Markey, Senator Warren, Congressman Kennedy, the congressional delegation in general. We are very fortunate in Massachusetts that Congressman Neal is the person that is actually writing the budget at the federal level. He is the chair of the Appropriations Committee at the federal level. So we have a Massachusetts person that is helping to, develop the financing as we move forward. So through your organizations in particular, I know you have some partnerships out in Western Massachusetts, Susan. So you might want to make sure that they're talking to Richie Neal about what they might want to see in a phase 4 finance plan out of the federal government for organizations like yours to help small businesses along the way. And that's how some of these things get done. I know we've worked with earmarks at the state level, but at the federal level, there may be an opportunity for such a thing because of the unique situation that small business finds itself in today.
Great. I'll definitely partner with the Western Mass teams on that too. Thank you. That's a great suggestion.
Senator, I know that we're, at that hour, so I'm not sure if you have time for just one more question.
Sure, I can stay on.
So it was with regards to the budget and the timeline, how it's not going to pan out that way this year. So what happened to the organizations or how can they prepare the ones that are funded mainly through grants So we have Rebecca Raposa. She's from TACC. She's our program director. I don't know, Rebecca, did you want to go more into detail about that concern?
Sure. So I met with you, Senator Pacheco, in January on Mass Mentoring Day. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Dan LeBrun's replacement.
I do remember you, Rebecca. How could one forget you, Rebecca?
Oh, thank you.
No, I do remember you. You're very energetic, and I am so sorry that this is, I mean, you're just taking on this new position and a great, organization, and you're coming right into the good news, Rebecca. It's not going to get any worse than this in the future as you go forward. It's really a challenge, though, for you, and I understand that, and I know you're concerned about the mentoring programs and what could happen in terms of all of these programs that are funded, significantly in part by some of the federal state dollars.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, when we met back in January, it was more of us advocating for an increase in the budget, and now it's just we're advocating for it to be in the budget period, mentoring programs. So any advocacy that you can help us with is greatly appreciated. I know you probably got an email from Trish O'Brien too, who is our career mentoring coordinator. We're just trying to also show that mentoring programs can sustain themselves through this virtual kind of world that we're living in. We've been doing it for the last few months, and while it was challenging, we know it's possible, and these youth really need our support now more than ever. So we are definitely advocating as much as we can, and I figured I would come on today and just remind you of that and see if there's anything you can do to help us.
Well, I'll do everything I can, and I think you've got the right attitude there. It's not so much about new money anymore right now. It's about trying to hold on to as much as you can going forward and trying to plan your programming that way. Because the good news is if you plan the programming for the worst case set of scenarios and things get better, then you do have a lot of good news to tell people.
Right.
But if you're not planning on the worst case scenario, and that means there's no new money, because there's going to be, most of the people I serve with in the legislature today have never served at a time when we've actually had to substantially cut the budget.
Right.
And so it is going to be a shocker to my colleagues that haven't been in that situation before,
Right.
because nobody wants to cut the budget, including me. I don't want, I mean, the budget at the state level is not made up of frivolous things. It's public health, it's education, it's public safety, it's local aid, firefighters, police officers, teachers, mentoring programs, child care, long-term care, all of those things. That's what makes up our state budget. And along the way, we have some other things, like we put in some incentives to help small business. We do other things. There are tax expenditures there. But it's not like we have a whole set of wasteful programs that you can cut into. Every time you cut somewhere, you're cutting into programs that will really impact people's lives in one way or the other. You get into long-term care, two-thirds of Medicaid. People look at Medicaid as a sort of a welfare program, right? Two-thirds of the dollars spent on Medicaid, that's long-term care. That's people that are senior citizens in nursing homes. That's what two-thirds of the dollars for Medicaid dollars that the state spends goes to. You know, and the rest of it goes to families that are poor with children that need assistance, that need, you know, food and clothing and pharmaceutical assistance and so on and so forth. So, so there's nothing that's wasteful that we have in our budget right now. And the programs that you administer really help build a stronger economy ultimately through the mentoring programs and everything that you do. So it's nothing that we would want to cut. But in terms of any of the programs getting even more money than what they have right now, I'd be less than honest with you if I didn't tell you that looks fairly unlikely right now.
Right.
Even though public education would be one of those top priorities in all the elements of education, including mentoring, even though it's not part of the public schools work with you very closely, and a lot of businesses work with you very closely. So it's something that we would want to try to maintain if possible. But, you know, there will be, I predict, there will be whole programs that we know of today that a year from now, in the next budget cycle, if we do not get the help from the federal government that we need to get, they may not exist. I'm not talking about your program. I'm just talking in general. There are a lot of different programs that are out there that are very fragile, and they're run by nonprofit organizations. And there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that have ended up solely depending on the government money they get, instead of doing their job as well, raising private funds, which I know you guys do all the time. But there's a lot of organizations out there that are, you know, 90% dependent on state government, and they maybe raise 10% or 5% of their total operating budget from private resources. That's not going to be the way to look at it, you know, going forward. There's going to be a lot more need for fundraising, going after philanthropic organizations, get grants out for different groups and organizations to try to help to keep the same level of service that you're providing today. But we'll follow up on that afterwards, and please stay in touch with my office. I certainly want to be helpful. And again, I congratulate you for being the new leader there. I just wish you had better circumstances in taking over your responsibilities.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's definitely been challenging, but like you said, it's preparing me for a bright future, right?
That's right. That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator, for you know, being part of our Chamber Connect today. Does anybody else have any other questions that they want to ask real quick? We can provide you with his, you know, the email address, contact information, as he said. So if you have any other further questions, just let me know.
Okay, let me just sign off then, and let me thank you very much for asking me to participate. I'd be glad to do this in the future. I will be trying to do a little bit more. I've got like probably 3 Zoom meetings. I've got about an hour right now to do some calls, one of which I just missed. But and I'm Zooming in and out all the time these days. And that's basically what I'm doing from my home office. It's been quite a challenge, and but I know as bad as things get, I keep in my home office, you know, over my shoulder here, you see a picture in the background, and that's the World Series picture of the Boston Red Sox. So I keep thinking, you know, we waited 86 years for that to finally happen. So you certainly always want to hope, and you always want to have, you know, you know, a goal. And I know that everybody here at small business in particular right now, and in particular, when I think about small business and I think about the travel industry in particular, Robin, and I think about the challenges that you guys face, you know, if there's anything I can do to try to be helpful, please let me know.
Thank you.
The problem is I am not going to have every answer, you know. I can only try to do what I can do, but I will try. And we just got to get through this, you know, working together. And this is something that goes beyond the norm when you're dealing with a virus and a public health crisis, to the extent that we're dealing with without the tools to deal with it. We still don't have adequate testing. We still don't have the number of people, thousands of people. Talk about a mentoring program, Rebecca. One of the things that we should talk offline about the mentoring program in tracing, in terms of different aspects of looking at some of the challenges that we're going to be facing, you know, going forward, and how we can work together to try to have some of these businesses and some organizations in the non-for-profit sector deal with this contact tracing issue, and the number of volunteers we really need to have to do that. Same thing with doing the census and a couple of other things that are going to be done out there. But please know that I'm here to represent your interests. I am more recently, as Christine knows, a small business owner myself. So I get what it's like to pay some bills and to try to make you know, payments at the end of the month, and to write out those checks, and to know when there isn't revenue coming in, to meet the demand that you have to meet, to just take care of the basic needs of your business. And how something like this is way beyond, it's nothing to do with you. It's nothing to do with the way you've ran your business. It's very much to do with the external environment and how that is impacting your business, the government, and everything else. So I get it. Let's continue to work together and keep this communication open. I thank you very much, and please call my office. My local office is right down at where the bid is located in downtown Taunton, at the where the
Trescott Street Gallery.
right at Trescott Street Gallery area. So I don't have staff in there all the time, although I do have staff in there periodically. But the number there is 508-822-3000. So it's 508-822-3000. And we will get back to you. If you leave all the information and contact information, we'll get back to you and follow up with you.
And
So
I'll be
thank you.
sending out that information after the meeting too. So if
Good.
you know, forget it, and some of the names of the people in your office too.
Good.
Thank you very much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye now.
Everybody have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Yeah, thank you, you too.